Good evening, good evening, good evening. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to WeatherBrains episode number 881. The pre-show, this is for the 5th of December. The pre-show is a magical time of the program when we do three things. We share boring personal stories, humorous anecdotes, and from time to time we say really, really outrageous things. And if you're looking for the show content, move the slider over about 8 minutes and we'll be there. So let me get the embed code locked in here. I think the guests have already been invited, and we'll see if we can find something outrageous to say. All right, embed code is good, so we can go on television, and let's bring in everybody. Here comes Bill. We've had a decent day today, nice weekend. Got some rain falling down here, but just good old-fashioned harmless rain, and we can deal with that. Looks like we're going to be flirting with record highs where I am this week. Record highs are upper 70s. 80 is the record high here on Wednesday. In 1951, our warmest December day on record. And I was not on television that day in 1951.
You probably should have been.
Bill, let me tell you what. Have you ever heard of Barry Butler, this amazing photographer in Chicago?
No.
He does amazing work. I mean, this guy is your twin brother. I saw a picture of Barry today, and I do believe that it's just creepy. Barry is an amazing photographer. I mean, he does amazing work, and but you don't really see a picture of him that often. But he posted a picture of him on his Facebook feed, and I'm thinking, whoa, man, that is Bill Murray.
There you go. Hello, Trent.
Hey, Bill. Hey, James.
Hey, Noah.
Hey. Thanks, guys.
Loud
and clear. Thank y'all for doing this.
Okay.
Gonna be
thanks for having us.
Yes. Gonna be a tough show. It's hard to go back and relive that night. You know, we've been through a lot of those, James.
Yeah, but in a way, it's therapeutic, I think. When you're kind of doing it, everybody that's watching this, they're weather people, and to me, it's very therapeutic to talk about big outbreaks among weather people, and because they get it, they understand the experience, they understand, what you went through to some degree, and anyway, it's good for all of us. So, thank you guys for doing this.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, thank you for having us.
We'll try not to send it down the tubes before we get talking about the serious stuff here. So, Bill, I mean,
yes.
What is this thing? But again, it looks like you're working a security guard desk at a motel here with your security cameras. What's the story here?
Well, I mean, you can see it's nothing but weather.
Okay, now it's I thought it was that same thing you had last week. It's not the same thing from last week.
Well, I can put that up if you'd like it.
No, that looks okay. That looks like TweetDeck, Tweetbot or something. Okay.
I moved the political part off of it, so nobody could get upset about that. It's over to the side.
Let's please, no politics here.
Hey, Christine.
How you doing?
Did you use my invite or Rick's invite? Did he invite you?
I got an invite from Bill.
There we go. Because I didn't have your email address. I had to look it up.
Oh.
I figured Rick would do it. Yeah.
Hey guys.
Some old friends over here, Christine.
Yes, there are.
Rick thinks he's like chairing an NWA session again.
Almost. If we could get Steve to lean against a chair on the stage or whatever he was doing, it'd be
that's true. And get John Gordon to yell a lot, it'd be great.
Yell and pace and
jump off the stage and everything.
I bet you John Gordon has gone crowd surfing at a concert. He's the kind of guy that would do that,
He's probably gone crowd surfing at an NWA meeting.
He probably has.
That was probably a good candidate that day.
I got a visual, guys, and it's kind of funny. Yeah.
Yeah.
You can totally imagine it.
Oh, yeah.
I groped John Gordon in an NWA meeting. That would be a good show title.
But you can't use it because it was in the pre-show.
No, it's in the pre-show, so we can't.
All right, we need Dan McKimmey. Where is he?
Got a lot of folks are coming online here. They are all
Are they?
rolling in.
You let him in, Mr. Gatekeeper.
And here comes more wanting to join.
Why did I get a penalty flag for that comment?
Which comment?
The one about their picks of the week, and then their picks of the week. I have to ask Mr. Adelot when he gets on here.
He's on here.
I could do without
Hey.
that turbulence forecast.
Oh,
Although I don't mind it. I mean, don't trust the air if you can't feel it.
that's true. You want to know it's there. Just when it starts dropping out from underneath you.
Here comes Dan. So I think the gang is all here.
We are. Yeah, we got a twofer up there with Trent and Noah in one window. Hey, Dan.
We're going to do it separately, but we figured it'd be easier together.
It is. That's perfect.
Yeah, just don't you
Band
guys
with
get into a fist fight while we're on the show here. Or actually, that might be good. That'd be good for ratings. I mean,
Bandwidth economy, 2 for 1. Hey, where's the birthday girl?
who?
Kim's
Actually,
birthday
really.
yesterday, I think.
Kim's birthday. I didn't
Yeah.
know that.
I think it was Friday.
Yesterday, Friday,
Saturday.
those days?
Saturday. Sorry.
I don't know.
bet you Rick got invited to her party and none of us did.
That's
we
about
didn't
right.
get invited. Yeah.
But
Which
he
is
refused to.
understandable.
He refused to fly
Couldn't
there.
go.
And welcome to not quite. We got to wait 50 seconds. I thought it was 7. We got 50 seconds. We'll start here at the top of the hour. So Neil's going to be a little late. He'll be about 30 minutes late, and Kim, with her active family, typically gets on a couple of minutes after the show starts. So I think we're good to go.
Jen, I have to scan something for you. I have a pamphlet one of the newspapers in Arkansas did on the Greenwood tornado in 1968 or 69. But I know you have a page for it, so I'll scan it and shoot it your way here in a minute. Well,
That'd be awesome.
maybe a couple of days.
Okay. Thank you, James. I appreciate that. Awesome.
Jen, I got to ask you have developed some purpleness around your glasses.
I know. And I promise they're not laser beams coming out. I promise. It's the only glasses I can wear right now until I've got to have eye surgery. They're the only, if I try to wear my other glasses, I can't see out of my left eye very well. So I'll be walking around like this, but they're the only glasses. And I tried the low light. I don't know how to get the angle.
What's the source of the light? I don't
know. It's the glare from one of the screens, but it's some way that's reflecting off my glasses.
Okay. All right.
You look
nice.
cool.
Right, you get the
It's very cool.
Look cool. Oh, man.
You kind of look like a
No.
superhero.
Yeah.
Never mind. Thanks,
No,
guys.
I like it. I mean, I'm not saying it's a negative. I'm just saying I wish I
No,
could do that. I mean, it's
I
like
know.
I don't get the same effect here. All right. Well, welcome to those watching on the television side.
So, hey, James. You know,
Hey.
Jen, you mentioned that we could chat through the WeatherBrains YouTube chat. What did I lose everyone?
No, you're here.
What do you
Oh,
mean?
there we go. Never
So
mind.
we
I was
can
not paying
chat
attention to
to-
the
we
Let's
can
have a little
chat
bit of an
through both.
episode here.
Yeah, I'm having an episode here. I'm like the people that call the Paul Feinbaum show, you know, like, hello, you're on the Paul Feinbaum show. And it's like,
There you go.
they're waiting to hear themselves on the radio, you know. So I picked up
All
our
right.
YouTube channel and it works beautifully. Of course, there's a delay. We could use that to interact with
There's always
audience.
guys. There's always people chatting over there. So,
I'm a moderator. That sounds like a lot of power.
yeah. All right, let's get
No,
this thing
that's
started
great.
here. All right. So here comes recorder 1, track 2. And here we go in 5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
Join the American Meteorological Society by becoming a member of the band. The AMS Weather Band is a global community of weather enthusiasts dedicated to learning and sharing their love of science. Visit amsweatherband.org to learn more and join the band today.
Hey, hey, hey. Most marvelous time of the year. December is here. Christmas on the way. This is WeatherBrains episode number 881. This is for the 5th of December, 2022. Yeah, getting close. Thanksgiving is over. Man, this year has flown by. But you know what this means? Our 17th anniversary is a month away. January of next year marks 17 years of WeatherBrains. And Troy Kimmel, I don't know if that's a good thing or a bad thing. I really don't know.
Well, I got to tell you, you don't look a year over 16. So, that's a compliment.
Yeah. I'm trying to see if that's a cut or a compliment here. No, one thing about it, Troy, this is not the best weather podcast in America, but by golly, this is the longest running weather podcast in America. We were podcasting before anybody knew what that was.
Yep.
It was January of 06. And, early
we even started
adopters-
calling it a netcast for a while because there was some idea that it was going to be proprietary to Apple or something like that, James.
But we
not only
did.
sailed, it sunk.
Oh, it went right down the tubes. But no, there was a big push to get people to call them netcast because people, when they hear podcast, it was involving the iPod and the Apple infrastructure and ecosystem and all that. But now it's just a podcast. It's universal. So anyway, we are here. Kim, I see you just joined us. Happy birthday a couple of days late.
Yeah.
Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday.
Thanks, guys. I for those who haven't heard, I am now just a slightly older age bracket than I was before. I just turned 40. So if you guys have any great wisdom for me about making it through the 40s, I am all ears.
Do we need to check our driver's license?
Silence. The silence.
Everyone's just like, I'm sorry.
We need to wait, whoa.
Condolences, maybe, Kim.
We got to deconstruct this whole situation here. Yeah. So are you really 40 or are you telling the truth? Are you 40?
Believe it or not, I don't. It's crazy because I don't really feel like I could possibly be, but I have a feeling that that's how most people feel. But I also feel like, man, I have done a lot of things. So, on the other hand, it really seems to kind of suit. I mean, I'm I'm just really pretty grateful to have made it to 40 and to have had, you're laughing, Bill, but.
No, I'm like looking forward to 80. I've got a zero in mind too, but doesn't have a 4 on the front of it. That's for sure.
Lord, I agree.
But my line. I have underwear older than Kim. So
let's
we
move
can,
on now.
Yeah, and I clearly do need some new underwear. But no, I never thought I would live to be past 20. When I was in first grade, this was in 1962, we had something going on called the Cuban Missile Crisis.
Yep.
And we had nukes aimed at the Southeast United States. At the same time, soon after that, the high school kids were going to some place called Vietnam. I didn't know what it was or where it was, but some of those boys weren't coming back. And between the nukes and the Vietnam and some other stuff, I never thought I'd live to be 20. So I feel like I've cheated the system. But Kim, listen, I'm old as dirt and I feel great. I mean, I feel better now than I felt when I was 30.
Mm-hmm.
So don't sweat the big 4-0. You got some good years ahead. Rick Smith, we're not going to ask how old you are, but any advice for Kim? You have probably blown past that level.
I'm trying to remember what that was like. I can't. I'll get back to you. I'll get back to you before the end of the show, unless I forget to think about it. But no, happy birthday. I never would guess you were 40, and I mentioned in the chat having 3 kids can make you age quite a bit, but that doesn't seem to have happened to you. So keep doing what you're doing, whatever it is.
Right. I mean, having little kids I feel like it either ages you or it regresses you. So in some ways, maybe that's why I feel so young. I mean, I watch a whole lot of cartoons for someone who's supposed to be an adult. Like I'm actually a pretty good 5-year-old, I think. So I'm keeping it young.
Things about being a parent is you get excuses to be a kid again. So yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, let me tell you, SpongeBob is funny. I mean, if you don't think that show's funny, there's something wrong with you. I mean, that show is funny. James A., have you ever watched SpongeBob SquarePants?
Absolutely. I try to fit it in around Paw Patrol.
Getting it on to getting the show back on the rails in Oklahoma. Aren't you guys? Did you guys see some low 80s somewhere today, and maybe the western part, Rick?
Yeah, Southwest Oklahoma, the clearing line made it right up into Tulsa at about 4 o'clock, and the difference was about 50 on the east side of the metro and 60 plus on the west side of the metro. Meanwhile, Southwest Oklahoma, 80s, but they'll pay for that at some point.
Got 75 here in the backyard today here.
Oh.
So, yeah.
And for those that are not watching, Rick is in a tank top and flip flops, and he looks really good too. So,
Gotta be
sure
watching.
Everyone in the chat is wishing you a happy birthday, Dr. Kim Cloco McLean.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I appreciate that. Thank you so much, everybody.
And we had a warm front down here today too. Parts of our state, they were in the 70s, the other part of the state in the 40s with rain. So Jen, you're not in the warm air up there, are you?
No, I've got the turtleneck on to prove it.
Is it
It's
April?
cold up here. It is
Yeah.
cold up here. And Kim, I want to tell you, I loved my 40s so much. I will miss them in March when I turn 50. Yeah.
Ooh.
I
don't
turned
believe
50,
that
so-
either, Jen.
At least we're all even numbers. That's
We're all even numbers, but yeah, my 40s have been great because you just keep learning, and I feel young, and I keep doing new things every year, and it's been awesome. So happy birthday!
Well, thank you very much. I mean, speaking of people whose ages we can't believe, I cannot believe. I mean, I would have pegged you for being my age. So
Thank
you just, but I mean, you're so rich in, so many ways in your personality too, that, sometimes that is something that does come with time, and that goes underappreciated. But I like to think I'm a much better person in a lot of ways than I was, when I was going from the 20s to the 30s. I'm just a whole lot more self-confident, realistic. Part of that is that I was in my PhD, and that kind of twists your brain in a PhD program. As I see James A going,
James doing the thumbs
brain
up.
twisted. Getting out of that was probably good for me. But I think that there really is a beauty that comes with time, and there's just no substitute for it. So with that, I could believe that you have had that many years.
Oh, thanks, Kim.
So Bill Murray, my secret to youth, it's this stuff right here. This is L'Oreal True Match mineral makeup.
Yes.
You see, no, actually paint on this barn doesn't do any good. So Bill Murray, bring in our guests, please, before they run and hang up on us.
Yeah, James, we got an outstanding crew tonight. Kind of a tough subject to talk about, but a year later, a good opportunity to, as you said in the pre-show, have a little therapy among weather people. But Rick, do you want to introduce Christine, or do you want me to, since you arranged for her visit?
Well, I can real quick. I don't have anything. I don't have.
I was just going to keep it all nice and short. I'll be glad to do it if you
I'll let you do it, but I just want to say thanks, Christine, for being here. Christine's my counterpart at the Paducah office, and she's got an amazing story, lots of amazing stories about this event. So look forward to hearing from you tonight, Christine. Thanks so much for being here.
Thanks for inviting me.
She is the WCM at the National Weather Service in Paducah, and she does have a lot of interesting stories about this evening. Christine, we're so glad you're here. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you.
And tonight we have the lead forecaster at the National Weather Service in Louisville, which of course was responsible for the Bowling Green tornadoes and several other tornadoes that night. Dan McKimmey, welcome to WeatherBrains.
Yeah, thank you for having me on. I'm excited to be here.
And we want to hear a little more about your background. You started out in Rapid City, you ended up in Louisville, and of course you had to pass the infamous John Gordon interview, I would imagine, to get this job. Any secrets that you could tell potential job seekers who might be looking to get on at the Weather Service in Louisville?
Yeah, I guess I better be careful what I say. No, it's
oh, he's not watching, I'm sure.
No, John's great. His interviews are tough, but they're fair. He'll ask you all sorts of questions. You got to be on your toes. Expect anything. But yeah, I did start out in Rapid City before coming to Louisville, and even before Rapid City, I actually worked at the Warning Decision Training Branch or Division. It is now in Norman, Oklahoma, for a couple of years. So I've been around the country.
Wow, it's really good to have you here tonight. Christine, I have to mention, you've been your entire Weather Service career at Paducah, right?
Yes, I've been here 22 years, almost 23 years. So I started as an intern and worked my way all the way up at the same office. So kind of unusual for the
rare?
weather service.
Yeah, I was going to say, Rick Smith, how rare is that?
Well, I wasn't able to do it, so it's no, you don't hear that very often. I'm pretty sure we have people in our office that have done that have been there longer than I have, who are like a lead forecaster who've been there their entire career. So it can happen, but yeah, it's not common.
And another person who is working at his home station, in effect, Trent Okerson is the chief meteorologist. He works the mornings for WPSD Local 6 in Paducah. Trent, you grew up in Metropolis, right? And this is your kind of one of your home stations watching growing up.
Yeah, Metropolis is just right across the river, 15 minutes away from Paducah, and grew up watching WPSD. Watched every night when I was a kid, and just was blessed to get my first TV job at my hometown station, and have been here for 15 years now.
Wow, that's another amazing story. Your colleague who works evenings is from Connecticut. Trent introduced us to Noah Bergeron. Noah, it's good to have you here. But you're watching you on camera, in the all the film and the videos that night, the live videos as you were streaming. You look like you've been there forever.
Well, I don't know about that. That means a lot to any of you, seriously. But I think that's more of a testament to the person to my left, right, state.
Yeah.
But it's funny. Growing up in Connecticut, when I moved here, our news director Perry Box kind of gave me Trent can attest this. This is not the meat and potatoes of this discussion, but maybe like a John Gordon-esque interview, but for news. I mean, it was one of the more grueling interviews you can ever have, I think, for a TV meteorologist job, especially somebody from Connecticut who sees blizzards and not tornadoes. So it's been quite an interesting journey coming here.
Yeah, and you mentioned that because I know you probably got asked the same question that Trent talked about at NWA by Mr. Box. And James, you're going to really appreciate this. Trent, he asked you, what's your job, right? Why don't you tell that story?
Yeah, so Perry, he's our news director. He came to the station in March 2018, and our GM brought him into the studio in the morning, kind of in between some cut-ins, and introduced myself. And Perry asked, "What do I do for a living?" So I said,
meaning you, the meteorologist.
Yeah, what do I do for a living? And I said, I'm the morning meteorologist. He said, "No, but what do you do for a living?" So I said, "Well, I forecast the weather." And I wasn't really sure where this conversation was going. And he looked at me and he said, "No, you save lives." And I said, "Oh, okay." Thought maybe that was a little intense. And he said, "How do you do that?" "You track storms." So that's our station motto. It's on the logo that we show on our graphic, on our banner. We track storms, and that's one of those things that. So we had a tornado in March 2019 that hit just west of Paducah. It was an EF2. Crazy story with that. Mount Zion is a church that has a preschool in it. It hit at about a little after 9 o'clock in the morning. There's 45 students and staff members that are in this school. They all got the warning, took cover. We're all safe, no injuries. But if you looked at the church, you would have thought there was another story involved there. So that morning I was working solo here at the station, and that was kind of like, okay, now I'm kind of seeing what he is, what he means. Not that I didn't realize that there's a responsibility involved with our job. Obviously I did, but 99% of the time it's, how do you plan your day? Do I need to carry an umbrella? Do I need a coat? Those kind of things. It's, those 1% days when it is a life-saving job. And then on December 10th, I've never worked an event where after the fact, so many people poured out their stories to us. And we're not talking about like, hey, you did a good job, thank you. We're, paragraphs of people, emptying their soul about everything that they went through that night. And, for me, more than at any other point in time in my career, that idea that we save lives, that mission became real that night.
And Dr. Clocko McLean is already ready for you to share lots of those stories. So we're going to get around to that for sure, Trent, because they're very, very real. Christine, this week was unique for you because it was your first week in your new job, an important job. Talk about that, all that crazy week that was and wasn't at the same time.
Well, that's a pretty long story, but so my predecessor, Rick Shanklin, as a lot of you already probably know, I retired in July, before that. And so I have been under his wings for better part of 2 decades. I mean, I was a little puppy dog, running alongside him for a long time. So, dealing with a tornado wasn't a big deal for me, but when you're dealing with something of this magnitude, it puts on a whole different level. And so back in July, we have a certain amount of vacation time that you have to use up. So I had about a week to use up, and I thought, well, I'll take a week in December. Not much severe weather happens in December. I'll never say that again. So I took off the week of December 5th, thinking I'd be safe to do that. And lo and behold, the job came out. I was lucky enough to be picked to fill his shoes, Rick Shanklin's shoes. And my official start date was December 5th. And so that happened to be the beginning of my vacation. Just happened to coincide with those dates. And so my very first day of my vacation, my boss calls me and says, hey, get ready. I'm picking you up. We're doing damage surveys. So we had already had a severe weather event, like the 3rd and 4th, somewhere in there. I was already on damage surveys the first day of my vacation, the first day of my official job as WCM. And I was out again on the 6th. I think I might have had the 7th off, or maybe I had a conference call. I can't remember. December 9th it was actually Kentucky's severe winter weather awareness week. And so we were posting things about winter weather all week. We actually had the staff kind of curtail that because of all the messaging we had been putting out for this event coming up. And so I had already scheduled to have a Facebook Live session in Henderson, Kentucky, on site, and talking with emergency management and some other members of EMA and police. And we were going to spend an hour talking about winter weather preparedness because we were dealing with a campaign. And it was kind of then when I just figured out that the public, which were putting in comments and questions and things into the Facebook Live, I could really tell they were amped up. And they were asking questions. And the first thing they told me is, hey, why are we talking about winter weather right now? There's a major severe weather event going to happen tomorrow, which would be December 10th. I said, listen, I know. I said, let me get through what we need to get through with this winter weather campaign. And I promise you, I will stay on till midnight if I have to, and to answer each and every one of your questions. And that's exactly what we did. We went through the winter weather stuff, and then you can just tell by the caliber of the questions that they were asking that they were scared. And it told me a lot about their level of preparedness, their level of just even paying attention, because we have been messaging so much along with Trent and Noah and all the other news networks and social media. We've been sending out information all week, kind of slowly ramping up, talking about the event that was going to be happening. And so that was kind of my first initial, this is going to be, something big. So fast forward to the day of, again, I was still on vacation, but as Rick knows and any other WCM across the country knows, you're never truly off the grid. You got emails, phone calls, text messages, everybody and their brother asking about what's going to be happening. And so I called into the office numerous times and they said, we've got this. We got more than enough people to handle the shifts. We got more than enough people to handle radar, everything else that goes on in a weather service office during a major event. I'm like, okay. And I remember the one forecaster, he says, rest up, Christine, you're going to need it. And I'm like, okay. So the night of, I was out. I had take my kids to the church and doing other things. And I happened to see the radar and I saw the storm in Arkansas. And I thought, this is it. I mean, there were so many meteorologists that said the same thing. Once they saw it, they're like, this is it. This is the big one. And I remember thinking, okay, this is getting a little scary. How bad is this going to get? You know? And I distinctly remember there was a lot that happened that night. We could talk about that later, but there was that one thing that happened right when it crossed over the border and it eventually hit Mayfield. And that's when I knew I saw the radar signature. Again, any meteorologist with any education knows this is not good. And I remember getting a call from Kentucky has area managers that cover, they basically serve many counties. So area 1 manager covers all of Western Kentucky. And he calls me. He said, Christine, it's bad. He's like, we've got injuries, we've got deaths, multiple deaths and extensive damage. And I remember that moment in time when he said that. I was trying to write down what he was saying and I couldn't write anymore. My hand wouldn't even work. I mean, it was like you stuck a dagger in my heart. I mean, I've been living here almost 23 years. These are my people out here. And we have family and friends in and around these areas. And I didn't even know what to do. I basically went into like a panic mode. And, before that, I had started calling some emergency managers, for Marshall, for Lyon, for Caldwell. And that's when my phone started blowing up. And I just started getting numerous phone calls. And, you're just trying to handle all this at one time. Where do we start? What do we do? And I remember my very last phone call that I made that night before I tried to lay down and go to sleep was to Rick Shanklin. And the first 3 words out of my mouth to Rick, I said, Rick, I'm scared. And, if you all know Rick, he's the epitome of the most Southern gentleman. He's like, Christine, you got this. You've been through this before. I mean, I was one of the main warning forecasters at the Evansville tornado, if you remember that event back in 2005.
Mm-hmm.
He's like, you've been through things like this. You're going to do fine, So that is basically a very short summary of what my first week is. And then there's a whole other story with the days that followed. So I'll shut up and let some other people talk here, but thanks for the opportunity.
No, your story is amazing. And then what happens from there, of course, you worked with Pat Spoden, who's a good friend of the show and a friend of all of ours, and
Definitely.
has recently retired. And we had him on right after the tornado. I don't know if he came up with the term "the beast," but of course, it became famous for that on 60 Minutes. But Dan McKimmey, put it in perspective for us. If Christine wanted to go on vacation in early December, that probably was a pretty good bet from a severe weather standpoint for Kentucky, wasn't it?
Yeah, at least within our CWA, there really aren't a lot of December tornadoes going back through the decades, just from a climatology standpoint of view. So, if you're going to pick a vacation, a time to go out, a time where severe weather is going to be at a minimum, you'd think December typically would be the month to go. At least within our CWA. So our Weather Service office covers 49 counties in Kentucky, central Kentucky, and 10 in southern Indiana. I think prior to that event, about 70 years worth of Decembers, going back to 1950, there had only been 7 tornadoes in the month of December in that region. So, 70 years worth of Decembers, only 7 tornadoes within that time span. So, that night itself produced lots of tornadoes, obviously, and kind of busted any, misconceptions about December being a quiet month.
Well, Noah, go back to that week, because I imagine a lot of those folks that were, talking to Christine at her briefing were probably quite concerned, and they probably represented a lot of people that were scared. When did you start to talk about the upcoming event in your newscasts in that week before?
Well, it's funny. Was it Sunday night? So a year ago yesterday on Sunday, there was, I can't remember if it was a marginal or just a general outlook or a marginal 1 risk, but it was a warm front with a lot of most unstable Cape. I mean, it was quite significant. I wouldn't say extreme, but a lot of elevated instability. We were calling for some small hail in the evening. I was actually watching football at home, and I remember watching the radar coming out of Jonesboro, and I'm like, what in the heck is going on here? I mean, there were multiple severe thunderstorm warnings for big hail. So I had ended up coming in that Sunday afternoon to I didn't think that I would, be on at all that evening because I was not working that night. Our meteorologist at the time, Kaylee Bowers, was on. But it looked concerning enough that I came in to come sit with her. Lo and behold, that ended up overperforming. And we got places right outside the station with greater than a quarter sized hail. And I wouldn't say it was like a total shock, but it was a surprise little event. And it was it was in that moment, knowing that, we were looking behind the scenes at the Euro for Friday, because the Euro was all over the 500 forecast for that Friday. It was very consistent. I don't want to say we looked over the Sunday night little hail event, but it's when that overperformed. It was that moment that it was like, the flags went up more, because, it was pretty clear that this was a very marginal setup. And it had already been, I think it was the warmest first week of December ever here.
Yeah.
And it had already been 60s and 70s. I was playing golf every day before work that week. So it was Sunday that we started mentioning it for Friday, but that was kind of the first precursor for me, was when that hail event overperformed.
Yeah, I mean, we started, even on Monday of that week, at least,
Yeah.
Verbally putting it in the forecast. And then, so Tuesday,
Yeah.
4 days out. And I think it's something, there's been a little bit of controversy there with the idea that, there was really not a day 4.
There was none, right?
There was,
Right.
there was no day 4 outlook for us. And so we actually kind of made the joint decision. We're just going to go ahead and draw, our own outlook and start, treating this as if, the same way that we would, 1, 2, 3 day type severe weather setup, and kind of made our own outlook. And there was still in the days leading up to it, you can remember there was a little bit of uncertainty, mainly over whether or not there would be a cap that night. And that was kind of the main thing. We, even Monday and Tuesday of that week, everything, I mean, it was just, every model that you could look at, every parameter was screaming, this is going to be a big deal for us. And we had record highs. We had basically record dew points across our area. Incredible mid-level winds were in the picture. And so it was, does the cap hold or not? And that was really the only thing that even, Tuesday and Wednesday beforehand kept us from really just, going all out with our messaging leading up to that.
I had texted him Tuesday, Bill, after the Euro came out. Tuesday, what was that? Within like 3 PM. And we pulled the sounding archive, and Christine probably was looking at all this too. And I can't remember if it was it was a very similar wintertime event where we had multiple F2s and 3s in the area. And it beamed out as a very strong analog for the event, being a day 5 forecast. And that was what pushed me over the edge to more answer your question. We were talking about it on Sunday, but it was really Tuesday night that it went from, let's keep an eye on Friday, to let's highlight, bold, underline Friday.
Yeah. And our area really has, over the last 20, 25 years, we've had a very rich history with cold season tornadoes. In fact, the majority of our deadly tornadoes here over the past, 2-3 decades have all been wintertime tornadoes. The Evansville, the November 2005 Evansville tornado, we had an F4 November 15th of 2005 in a very similar part of Western Kentucky that hit Kentucky Lake. We've had the leap day system. We had a deadly tornado in Harrisburg, Illinois in 2012. There was a deadly tornado in November 2013 in Brookport, Illinois, Perryville, Missouri. So all of these are in our viewing area. And by and large, the bulk of our big events have occurred in the cool season between November and February. And it was a classic setup. The analogs lined up, for this to be comparable to those. And so, 2-3 days out, we were pretty much all in on the forecast for that day.
And Dan, even as the outbreak is starting, sometimes you begin to doubt yourself a little bit. You're getting that one clue, and the instability and things, the parameters were certainly a little bit stronger to the west. But were you looking at those SPC maps that night going, on those first few tornado warnings when they don't verify, maybe this event isn't going to be as big as we thought. Did that thought ever cross your mind?
So, when I got into the office, it was about 6 o'clock Eastern that evening for the event. And by that point, I think some stuff had already kind of started going off to the west, or at least would shortly go off afterwards. The things we were looking at and what we were seeing, we were getting the feeling this could be a pretty significant event in our area. As you alluded to earlier, we actually had this very tight gradient of SIN, or stable air, in the lowest levels right along Paducah's CWA and our CWA, so across kind of central western Kentucky. And a lot of the storms that went up initially in our area encountered that air mass, and I was one of the warning forecasters working that event. And it was really hard to determine whether or not they were tornadic or not. SBC saw the environment and they coordinated with us to put out a tornado watch. So we had one out pretty early, but we had a lot of storms that were really close calls on, could this produce a tornado, or is the air a little bit too stable for tornadoes to develop? And it was tough. I ended up putting out a few warnings into the first part of that night on those storms, and none of them verified, at least in our CWA. Now, it's not to say they didn't produce tornadoes. Paducah actually did have one just literally west of our county warning area. So about a county just west from where we were issuing warnings. And by the time it drifted into our region, it had lifted. But the environment was just super, super tough in the early parts of the night. But then as the night went on, that's when our air mass got a little bit more unstable and we had a lot of shear to work with. And then the eventual Mayfield storm would come barreling in late into the night.
Dr. Neil Jacobs has joined us. Neil, welcome to the show. We're glad you got your chores and things out of the way and that you could be with us tonight.
Yeah, it's good to be here. Sorry I'm late. I'm just catching up in the chat.
No, there's if you want some fun, go over and look at the YouTube chat. Those guys over there are awesome. I've got guests for the next 6 years over here. I've been taking notes because they're really awesome. But we're glad you're here, Neil. James, I wanted to catch up some of the chat that's going on over here on the internal chat, because some great comments are being made. Why don't you lead it off with some discussion about what we're talking about right there?
Yeah, and we were talking about these out of season events, because in Oklahoma, we're familiar with April, May, first part of June being severe weather season. Of course, it's a little more protracted in the South, a lot more protracted in the South. But that's an issue with vulnerability when it's not top of mind for people. I'm kind of getting into Dr. Kim's realm here a little bit, but I wonder if there's, with repeated severe weather off season, how that affects awareness and how that may affect even warning fatigue in a time of year that people aren't expecting it. And then you throw in Friday night in December, you've got all kinds of high school sporting events and holiday things going on, and it may just not be top of mind for many people. So, enormous kudos to you guys for messaging this all week long.
I think it's one of the reasons why we didn't have triple the amount of deaths. When you look at the square miles of damage, I mean, just in our CWA, we had 128 square miles of damage. The amount of people that were impacted by this tornado, it's mind blowing, especially when you're down there on the ground doing surveys for 2 weeks or 2 months straight. And we talked about this at the office. We talked about this as a management team and said, how do we only have 57 deaths? And I think it is because of the work that the Weather Enterprise has done as a whole. All of the talks, all the spotter talks, all of the campaigns, all the great work that our broadcast media has done, the Emergency Management Agency has done. And that's why the Weather Enterprise works so well, is because we need that three-legged stool to make a difference. People like Trent mentioned, people in this area, they're no stranger to severe weather in the wintertime months at night. And I think it's because of the work that has been done to prep people, to make people aware, to make people not go to sleep without turning their phones on and making sure the weather radio is plugged in. All of those things pay dividends to people paying attention and taking action.
Christine, you mentioned something I found interesting because it resonated with me. I was on television on the Palm Sunday event in Alabama in 1994. And going back to my childhood, anytime, you heard there were fatalities during the weather reports, during tornado events, that would be that, there's where it becomes really real. And I can remember James, one of the ham spotters, reporting back from the church at Goshen and saying there are numerous fatalities.
It was Jack Blair.
It almost
Jack Blair.
makes
I'll
you
never forget it.
just stop what you're doing. Did you experience that same thing, Christine, in that moment?
Absolutely. And like I mentioned, when I saw the storm, I was about to cross into Tennessee or into Kentucky from Tennessee, I remember thinking to myself, this is going to be bad. You prepare yourself mentally for what could happen because you've been through it before. You've seen storms like this of this magnitude. And you're just like, well, how bad is it going to get? Are we just going to have a few deaths? Or are we going to have multiple deaths? And never in my wildest dreams did I think we were going to be dealing with a mile wide, high-end EF4 that went for, over 150 miles. That's not something you think about, we haven't had a tornado of that length and this destructive in quite some time. So no, I wasn't ready for that. And that's why I think it put me into shock for a few moments when he mentioned it, that all I could think about is, those poor people, what happened? And, I wanted to go out, and that's the biggest thing with the surveys afterwards is that you want to talk to everybody, and I wasn't as lucky enough as Trent and Noah and the team there at WPSD to be able to obtain all these stories. We tried to obtain what we could, but, it's all about the people. And that's what struck me the most, and just how much people have lost, not only in lives, but just property. It was right before Christmas. I mean, it was just horrible. It was just very horrible. So don't want to go through that again anytime soon.
No, let's don't. Now I was particularly moved that night because we were monitoring the weather very carefully. We have hotels in Kentucky that, we were afraid would be in the path, and the two tornadoes that went past Murray. I know we've got an audience member that's from Murray, Kentucky. One went to the north, one went to the south, and then the long track tornado seemed to be drawing a bead on Madisonville, and of course hit Dawson Springs and that area. But leading into that event, looking at what's coming out, and I thought your office did one of the greatest things. And I don't know who the forecaster was. Maybe you can tell us, but who put that SPS out that talked about 7 o'clock if that tornado held together or something to that effect?
That was one of our lead forecasters, Chris Knowles, and he's been here longer than I have, so he's been here a long time. He's been a lead forecaster for a long time. Again, seen a lot of events, and I think he knew, just like a lot of us, that this was the environment that this thing was going into. It had no signs of diminishing. It had no signs of, getting less intense. And I think he was kind of like at a point where I got to do something. He already called the emergency management agencies. He's already in chat, our local or our internal chat room, making sure that all the broadcasters knew what was going on. That messaging was going on. The amount of social media posts that our office was putting out was awesome. If I had to go back and look, because I've not seen all that stuff. I was not watching that closely. I was watching other things and dealing with other things. But I was just amazed at the amount of messaging that our office had done. Not only the days prior, mentioning things in our area forecast discussion, putting out graphics like Trent and Noah were talking about. Even on Monday, we knew that this was something that was unprecedented. And even leading up to that event, there was so much. I can't even begin to explain it in just the 2 hours we have here together. But the tweets that were coming out of our office, like all caps, this things that we never have done before, sending out tweets with no graphics, the seriousness of the messaging that we were putting out that day and leading up to that day was pretty unprecedented. So that SPS that Chris put out was, I hope it was received by a lot of people because it was kind of like the warning before the warning.
Yeah.
So it was a great job.
And that was a huge part of our coverage that night as well. Our friends at the National Weather Service in Paducah we've got an incredible relationship with them. They do amazing work. And, when we saw the seriousness of their message and their tone in the days leading up to that, obviously that boosted our forecast confidence. And we'll never forget seeing that special weather statement come across. And I actually read it on air that night. And I had never seen anything like that come out. Neither one of us had. And so whenever we saw that, come out from the local office, we already knew it was going to be bad just by looking at the storm on radar and the reports that had already come out. But seeing that kind of messaging, from our folks at our local office, that just kind of put this in. It was a whole other ball game at that point for us.
It's amazing how sometimes that's the simpler message, something that's different, that stands out, the non-standard, non-cookie cutter, that SPS and that plain text tweet. I remember that I think the Paducah office sent out was just like, we're just going to tell you straight up what's going on here. That got my attention. That gets attention more than, there was nothing about a moderate risk. There was nothing about a tornado watch this, or it was just like you would talk to your friend or your relative or whoever, plain language, straight up. And that was really, really good. And really have to commend all the offices, Paducah, Louisville, St. Louis. All the offices did an amazing job with that non-standard messaging. And I remember talking to Pat Spoden when he was on Christina, it seemed like that you guys had been practicing this for years. It seemed like you had a playbook and that all this stuff just fell out of that so naturally. It is amazing how great, it's not amazing, it's not unexpected that the messaging was so great. But you guys should really be proud, Louisville, Paducah, every office, because it's that stuff that you invent on the fly that you just do. Oftentimes it's the best stuff that in an event like this.
Rick, one thing that I noticed, and a lot of people listen to us on Monday evenings, and maybe you don't have a map where you can see Paducah and Mayfield, but Trent and Noah and Christine, this was not far. Paducah is not far from Mayfield. It's the crow flies. What?
It's 25 minutes.
Okay.
Yeah.
It's just amazing to me. When you realize that and you look at that, I just happened to pull up the Paducah radar on GR over here, and I was sitting here looking, there's just not much distance in that. So truly amazing. And the SPS, as Bill pointed out, the hair stood up on the back of my head that night reading it. I'm sitting there going, first thing I thought was, way to go. Because you were looking at this thing coming across the Mississippi River into the Missouri boot heel. And it had no intention of doing anything but moving right ahead. So it just wasn't far from anyone. This thing is right there to the south of you.
Yeah, just amazing. And as we watched it just continue to roll on, Trent, you've got a history with the tri-state tornado. Why don't you share that story? And when did it occur to you that we were talking about a long track tornado that may be on the ground for, over 100 miles?
Yeah. So, whenever you're on air covering an event like that, there's a whole lot of different things that are going on in your mind at the same time. For me, it was there was the human toll and thinking about that and the weight of that. But there's also then on the science perspective of, we're tracking this thing and we see, we've had a consistent, strong rotation on this thing and a debris signature, all the way back in Northeast Arkansas. You start seeing it coming up, into the boot heel, Tennessee. There was a small 11-mile or so area in Tennessee where the storm cycled. We didn't realize that the circulation had lifted because the rotation on radar still looked just, really strong. So yeah, this thing comes up into Kentucky and we realize, it's probably been on the ground, for at least, hour and a half, 2 hours, and, well over 100, maybe 150 miles. And so, when we're on TV talking about this thing, in my mind, I'm thinking, are we covering the new, the storm that's going to surpass the tri-state? My grandparents both grew up around Heron, Illinois, which is, less than, 5-10 miles away from the path of the tri-state tornado. And so, one of the many things that drove me toward an interest in weather and a career in meteorology was, hearing their stories of what it was like, seeing this gigantic black cloud go across the ground and, destroy everything in sight whenever they were kids. And so, yeah, when you're on TV, thinking about, is this it? Is this the storm that sets the new record? That was one of the many things I think both of us were thinking in that moment, covering it.
It's funny. We were just, we're doing a 1 hour special on Saturday night, which we're still trying to grind out and finish. We've been doing that all the last few days very extensively. But on what Trent just said, it's actually very interesting. I was plotting a KML of the path and trying to fancy it all up. And we were sitting there looking at the path where it broke up near Reelfoot Lake, which if any of y'all listening may or may, I'm assuming most of y'all know, but if you don't, Reelfoot Lake is probably one of the more interesting natural phenomena in this part of the country. If you don't know about it, Google search it. It's incredibly interesting. But in Max, you can enable the terrain. So, I'm messing around with the terrain, being the graphic whiz nut that I am, I'm messing around with everything. And, I'm sitting there messing with the terrain and I'm putting it up, down, and the path of the tornado stops where the terrain goes up. It's not where the lake is. The Reelfoot Rift is on the side of where the earthquake, mind you, almost 200 years to the date ago happened, that where the earth is still coming up in parts. The elevation goes from about 200 feet to almost 700. And we had never even thought about the potential. We're not saying that it did, but we had an aha moment 2 days ago sitting here, and Trent will back me up on this, where, it just blew our minds that a multi-generational earthquake, almost 200 years to the time of year, potentially saved this tornado from being, the longest in history, because it broke up perfectly right where the elevation jumps about 500 feet.
This may all be the sleep deprivation talking.
Maybe. I don't know. That's very potential.
It's a theory. I don't know. Maybe Christine, that may be something that we could all look into at some point.
We had an aha moment. That's the point.
There is so the first track, the one that went from Arkansas into Tennessee, it lifted just past Sandburg, Tennessee. And if you look at the topography, there is a noticeable change in topography just east of Sandburg, where the tornado dissipated. It kind of put down some little small, brief circulations before, like there was a 13-minute window where it was not a continuous path. So, had that change in it, supercells cycle. So most likely it was just cycling, disruption of the circulation, but, maybe elevation kept us from setting a new record with this. But, that was kind of the sciencey, part of what was going on in our mind, as we're watching this thing. And, if you open any textbook and, there's an example of what a tornado looks like on radar, this was it. I think I even said that, in my coverage that night. We had never seen a debris ball that was that well defined. We had never seen, a CC. This thing was just off the charts once it got into Kentucky. And, it was just, from a science perspective, being able to watch this unfold live on television was, that part of it was pretty remarkable. But, all of that's overshadowed by the impact to the people that are watching and listening to the words that you're speaking.
It's really just amazing the interest people have in this, and the speculation about whether that was a record or not, and what the surveys were going to find, not only the EF scale ratings, but also was that track continuous. Obviously Weather Twitter and social media had a field day with that, I know, to probably the frustration of Christine and Dan and others at the forecast offices who are out there working their tail ends off doing damage surveys. We can get into that a little bit later. But yeah, that whole record business really took over social media there for a while. A lot of excitement about that.
Yeah, I just really quickly want to follow up on something you just mentioned, Trent. I was thinking about this as you guys have all been talking, but you kind of explicitly said it. You don't necessarily see this kind of event a lot in your area, period, let alone in December. And this being the first time you'd seen something like that, debris ball signature. And I mean, you guys have all the pressure of covering this live on air. And I can't help but wonder, we've been talking about how professionally this whole system functioned, but I can't help but wonder, did you feel like you were doing something you were really well practiced in? Or did you feel that adrenaline of, I'm making a bunch of this up as I go? And I mean, how do I adapt to something like this? I'm just curious how that felt being in your shoes, knowing this is not necessarily something that, it's not a place where you get a lot of tornadoes just all the time for you to practice this stuff.
I think it was just one of those things that in the moment, there's so much going on. There's adrenaline, there's fear, there's worry. It's kind of I don't know if it's the best analogy, but I'm a sports fan. I love to watch, I'm a huge baseball fan, and you hear a lot of folks they talk about you got to slow the game down in sports. I tried to just do that night and realized I kind of took a moment in my head while I'm on air and thought about the fact that this is going to be a historic event. This is the one that we're going to remember, for years. I even said some of those things on air. I think part of that was to obviously to communicate the awareness or the urgency. Maybe in my mind, I was kind of talking myself through it a little bit as well. But it was really, for me, it was just about slow down, think about the information that's coming in. Don't try to get ahead of yourself. And we sometimes in the TV business, we have a tendency to, go into TV mode. And I just decided that night I was just going to be, these are my people. This is our area. I'm just going to be real. Just going to be real with people. I'm going to be conversational, and just tell people what we know and put it out there in, simple and easy to understand terminology. Hardest part that night was to try to balance urgency versus panic, because the last thing we wanted to do was get people panicked, but we also needed to be able to use wording and terminology and tone that we had not used before. And so that was a really important aspect of what we did that night. Anything to add to that?
I mean,
what was it like? I mean, I've got 15 years, you've got 4. So what was it like? I mean, this is really your first really big event. So what was it feeling like that night for you?
I think the hardest part, honestly, was, and Trent have probably had a lot more of this than I did, but one of the hardest parts was having people in the path or near the path that I was not able to get in touch with and still have to be on air. And trying to, I'm sure we'll get to this in a few minutes, but there's a different subject of the as calm as Trent was on the air and as proud I am of the job that Trent and the entire team here did. How do I say this? Things were crazy behind the camera for about an hour because we had the chat go out, we had the radar and Paducah go out, the office lost comms, one of our Max boxes froze. I'm trying to call WSI support in it. I'm trying to keep Trent going, giving him the printouts, and for an hour, that on top of having to fix all of that and stay calm, and in the back of my head know that I've got friends that live right near Kentucky Lake, where you could probably throw a baseball to one of their neighbors and one of my friends who their house faces Kentucky Lake, and it just got licked clean off the, we never even know it was there. But that was the hardest part. And something that I don't know how you prepare for that. You don't.
Yeah, yeah. This event, and I'll hurry so we can move on. But for me, the story that's unique about this to me is I had, as I'm sure James and every other meteorologist on TV across the country do. We do school visits and go into classrooms. We talk to kids about why the weather does what it does, severe weather safety. Well, through a little bit of a scheduling mix up and maybe some divine intervention, I had a school visit planned at one of the elementary schools in Mayfield the day before the tornado. So on December 9th, I visited sixth graders at one of the schools. That day we already knew there was what the setup looked like. And obviously for sixth graders, you have to have the appropriate messaging whenever you're talking to them. But I made sure that we had a lengthy conversation about severe weather safety, what to do in a tornado, how to get warnings, make sure you got multiple ways to receive warnings, all those things that they were able to hopefully take that message home with their parents and have a discussion about. So having just had that school visit the day before, you're thinking about the people that are in the path, but I had faces to go along with those people that night. And as this thing is barreling toward Mayfield, those are the faces that are in my mind. And there were a couple of times that I really struggled to maintain my composure. It was hard for me to not, kind of get emotional thinking about, these kids are in the path of this monster. And it's 2 weeks before Christmas. I don't know what's going to happen to them. Are they going to live? Are they going to lose everything? And so, in the middle of all that adrenaline, that was the most difficult thing for me in covering that, was maintaining my focus and remembering, I've got to just kind of compartmentalize it. I'll deal with my emotions later after we're done. This storm's not going to stop at Mayfield. It's going to keep going. And so we've got a job to do, and we have to keep our focus, through some prayer and just kind of, giving that focus up, to focus on the job at hand. I was able to get through that, but that was by far the toughest part of that night for me.
I've got a quick question, I guess for all the TV Mets, because I'm not in that world. Do you all do like tabletop exercises to prepare for like what happens if everything that can possibly go wrong goes wrong all at the same time?
We probably don't do enough in that regard. That night was definitely one where just about everything that could go wrong did. I mean, we had a max box freeze at the very beginning of this. The chat, as most people know,
Don't get me started on that.
It was tricky that night, navigating that. I was sick. I had a fever that night. So I felt awful. It just pretty much, there were multiple things that were working against us that night. And it did, moving forward, in especially with severe weather events, we will do more to, as best we can anyway, have backup plans with those things. But, some of those things are just tough to navigate around. If your box crashes, then it crashes. You got to get it back online. And, thankfully we had our IT guy around that night. He was able to help us out a little bit. And, it was, that was a learning experience for us, was making sure that we got, adequate backups in the future.
So James A. Jonathan Exum asked a question in the chat, and I think you got the perfect answer for him. He wants to know, how did the TV meteorologists remain calm when they know that people may lose their lives?
I think Trent nailed it. The whole understanding that we're there to do a job. And what I'd put in chat before every event that I think may prompt a tornado warning, especially some of the higher end events, I will basically pray the Alan Shepard prayer under my breath, because I get really anxious during times like that, because I know that people watching or listening are counting on the way I'm messaging a threat to them. And it may be different for different people. So, one of the things we all try to do, and we have the opportunity when we're in continuous coverage, is phrase this multiple ways for multiple people to hear, because we all interpret things a little bit differently. But I'll admit, I get really anxious. And the whole thought of, if I screw this thing up, that's going to harm people that may need that clear, concise, actionable information they have to understand and they have to take action with. I can't tell somebody, I can tell somebody to get to a tornado safe room or a basement, but they're the ones that actually have to get off the sofa and go in there. And it makes me anxious, that responsibility. I'll admit that.
And James, you got a name for a night when everything goes wrong, like the folks at Paducah and Kentucky experienced that night. What do you call it?
Yeah, I said, that's our daily newscast. No, to answer Neil's question, we do tabletops, because in this size market that I'm in, and the same for James and you guys in Paducah too, there's a lot of turnover in the non-anchor and non-meteorologist position. So we've got people coming in here every spring that have no idea how things flow during severe weather. So we'll do a tabletop exercise, live shots, usually on a weekend in February, because it's ratings. Hopefully that minimizes who's away from the station. And so it's extraordinarily valuable to people to understand the logistics of how information flows. When a chaser hears something, phones that in, or their live stream, or a photographer, or the desk, there's a lot of different ways information flows in during severe weather events. And it's one of the most extraordinarily helpful things that we do. And, the Mets, we kind of look at it like, yeah, we know what to do, but it's everybody else that needs that drill.
Okay, Kim gave me permission to do this. I'm cutting line. You guys have alluded to it, but you can't even. I had no idea about all the TV stuff going on behind the scenes, having to call WSI and all that. But you talked about chat going down, NWS chat, which is a critical link between all the partners in the integrated warning team, and then Paducah lost power. We haven't even got into that yet. I want to be sure that we get to talk about the impacts of that, because Paducah effectively went offline completely, including their radar and everything they were doing. Throw that into the mix of this. I just don't. I had to go Google the Alan Shepard prayer to see what that was. I'm ashamed to say I didn't know. I've said that prayer many times in operations now that I know what it is. But yeah, it's incredible. So the whole enterprise, just as smoothly as things seem to go, looking from the outside. I'm part of the service assessment team where we've been looking at this, and we're almost done with the report, I promise. It's amazing to see all the crap going on behind the scenes that people work through, and it looks seamless from the other side, that the services that were provided. So I commend all of you for the role you played in that. It's just amazing. The more I hear about this, the more amazed I am.
Yeah, I think I would welcome any comments you have, especially Christine. What was that like in your office, and how did you navigate it? What was going on behind the scenes as you just, I mean, did you see that even coming, the power loss, or how did you navigate the situation?
Well, Kim, I wasn't at the office, but of course, I heard firsthand what happened, and it's been a year, so the details are kind of fuzzy. But as far as I know, power went out, just got cut off. We don't know why. But the biggest thing is that the weather service should be able to run on generator power. And there is a transfer switch that transfers the power to our generators. And that should take 30 seconds, and you should be on generators, and you can run on generators for quite a long time. And the problem is that the transfer switch never switched us over to generator. And again, kind of like what Trent said, when everything that could go wrong did go wrong. It was like all the Swiss cheese holes lined up to where why on this day, why on this moment in time did that decide to not work? And so, we can run a little, maybe an hour, maybe a little longer on batteries where they shut everything down. Maybe they're running with very minimal lighting, one TV on, kind of like the Apollo 13, running all low voltage or whatever just to save those batteries. And so the electronics technicians, they were frantic trying to figure out what to do. They actually brought in a tow truck to try to jump the generators and all this other stuff. There was so much that was done, again, scrambling behind the scenes, trying to get those generators to start. For whatever reason, the transfer switch wouldn't allow them to do that. So in the meantime, the staff is contacting, our backup offices. Okay. And our main backup office, as Dan knows, is Louisville. Well, we knew Louisville was going to be in the line of fire here, so that wasn't going to work. So then we contacted Springfield, like, hey, how you guys doing? It doesn't look good over here. I don't think we're going to get back on generator power. And like, yeah, we got it. We've been watching it, of course. So, you had enough time to relay all the information and do all you need to do to get that backup office ready to go. So it's just basically a flip of a switch, and they've got it. And, kudos to them. We had issued our first ever tornado emergency for the city of Mayfield, and they just took that and ran with it for the duration of the tornado in RCWA. They did nothing but tornado emergencies from the point they took over till the storm crossed over into Dan's area. And so, yeah, it's just we practice backup a lot. And you practice backup on good days when you have a meeting or something. Okay, well, this office is going to take over, and you're going to practice that because you're preparing for days like this when it's imperative that it goes over flawlessly. And I think it did. And one of the last tweets I think we put out was that, hey, we're putting over operations to Springfield. There will be no degradation of services. The warnings will still go out, that kind of thing. So.
Well, thank goodness for Springfield and the job they did that night. Dan McKimmey, you mentioned in your talk at NWA about the remote mesoanalysis program and how that's really critical to helping an office that's on backup get up to speed quickly in that situation. Because you've been watching your own weather. Storms were exiting the Springfield region that night. Out of their county warning area. Talk about that for a moment. That's a really cool thing that the Weather Service has spun up in the last few years.
Yeah, definitely. I do want to make a quick comment first. So when I think Rick pointed this out in chat, we're Paducah's primary backup and Springfield is the secondary. And so we got a call from Paducah right after they had taken that power hit. And they're like, hey, we can't get our generator back on. We will probably need you guys to take over for us. We're dealing with our storms here. When I got that call afterwards, I hung up and just put my hands on my face. And I'm like, oh no, could this really be happening on a night like this? But thankfully, I had a forecaster who was working with me, and he's quick thinking. He's like, well, Springfield's almost done with all their storms. Why don't we reach out to them and coordinate to try to get them service back up? And so we did that. And thankfully, they took over. And Springfield, I think, is an unsung hero in a lot of this because the forecasters there took up that role really quick. And I think it was Kyle Perez, the forecaster there. He issued a lot of the tornado warnings, had tornado emergencies, and all these really good tags on the warnings. They had excellent lead times. So Springfield did an awesome job. And then getting back to what you were saying, Bill, about the mesoanalysis. So Central Region has a program that they started maybe a year or two ago, where basically we, depending on the severe weather event, can offer remote mesoanalysis in addition to what the office has. And so, in office, we usually try to staff the office with radar warning forecasters, as well as someone who's looking at the environment or a mesoanalyst. But we have other folks who work across the Weather Service, or at least within our region, who will hop into chat and basically tell us what they're seeing and offer their input on the environment, what storms maybe to watch or what places to watch specifically for tornadoes or hail or whatever it may be. And so for that particular night, I know the Springfield folks utilized that chat, the remote mesoanalyst chat, to get bearings on the storm and to take up quick action for warnings. And we used it as well in our area for warnings. There was a forecaster I was talking to actually from Rapid City, Keith Sherburne. I was talking with him about the eventual Mayfield storm and when it tracked into our area. I was getting his input and advice about the storm and the environment ahead of it, because I was still a little uncertain as to whether or not we would see that low-level stable air erode in time by the time it would arrive, or if we thought the storm, the supercell, could overcome that stable air. So getting his input, as well as people in the office, just kind of solidified a lot of our warning decisions and allowed us to really get advanced warnings out. So it helped us out. I know it helped Springfield out a lot. And it's a really good program that other offices across Central Region have utilized.
I'm going to break in here just one more time. Dan, you mentioned the Springfield office being the unsung heroes of this, and there's lots of heroes in this, from the media to the Weather Service. But we mentioned Springfield issuing warnings and doing service backup, and Christine mentioned how often we practice that. A couple of key things, though. Springfield had already worked an hours-long severe weather event themselves. These storms started in the Springfield CWA in Southwest Missouri and moved into the Paducah and Memphis areas. So they had already been working severe weather, and there were people there that thought they were about done and time to go home. And then, oh, wait a minute, you get to now be Paducah for several hours. And then another fact that a lot of people don't know is Springfield did not have access to the Paducah radar. Well, nobody had access to the Paducah radar, and they could not use AWIPs. They used WarnGen to issue the warnings, but they were using GR analysts to do radar analysis on the available radar data to be able to make those warning decisions. So just lots of things you would never know that were going on. And James Adelot's accused me of being like a TV meteorologist cutting in. Back to regular programming. I'm done now.
Yeah, just to add to that, we also didn't have Paducah's products coming in, at least the radar stuff. And so for some of my warnings, I was actually utilizing Radar Scope and GR2 and kind of, using the proximity of where it was on those apps, as well as some of our stuff in AWIPs to try to kind of make these warnings. So, I mean, that, they already had a tough job spinning up very short notice and taking over a significant event, but then had to do it with one hand tied behind their back, in a sense, where they didn't have all the radar data at hand.
I had a question that we talked about a year ago, and I don't know that I've ever really determined the answer. What happened to the weather radio out of Paducah? Did that knock out all the stations, or were they still broadcasting? How does that work? And who wants to take that? Christine, is that in your wheelhouse?
That is. So basically, when we don't have power to our building, there is no broadcast being sent out from our building. So no, there were not. As soon as we went down hard for good, unfortunately, there was not. And
did y'all
Hmm?
Trent, did y'all realize that in real time? I mean, were you aware that you'd lost weather radio, which is a critical component, especially in a nighttime event, or just was everybody already pretty aware?
Yeah, I mean, I think we were aware that was, obviously with the Paducah office down, we were doing everything we could already to tell people, hey, if you've got friends, family in this town, that town, give them a call, make sure they know what's going on. But yeah, we did. We were aware of that. At the moment, we were just trying to, do the best we could to fill in that gap, as far as communicating that message.
And I made a note, Trent, during yours and Noah's different coverages as the storm was approaching Mayfield. I think Noah, my note may not be exactly right, but I think you said something to the effect of, this is the highest of the high-end tornadoes. And I thought that was a really powerful statement. Trent, you said, I can't read my own writing anymore, but you called it a once-in-a-generation storm. And I pulled those two comments out and thought, that's right up there with the SPS and a lot of other things at getting folks' attention. And I just applaud you for that, because I think that cut through the clutter, and I'm sure it did for your audience.
I'm fortunate. I work with a very good, Trent's not gonna like me giving him this much praise publicly, but I'm fortunate to have a colleague and leader of the team in Trent. I mean, we don't have, 6 meteorologists here. We've got 3 of us. So, we all have a lot of work to do for being just 3 of us. But to address what you just said, I, like Trent said earlier a few minutes ago about staying calm and keeping composure. I go back to when I was some of you are gonna laugh, young intern in Connecticut.
You're like 13 now.
Joe Murgo gave me an internship when I was just a sophomore at Penn State, and I thought I knew. I thought I knew about. And it's funny, I can say this now because, especially going through this, I thought I knew. I didn't know anything then. I mean, Joe was the first one to make me realize that, but it was Joe and then Ryan Hanrahan, and at the time Brad Field at NBC Connecticut, who when I was sophomore year at Penn State media, and I'm in home on the winter and the summer at an internship, and they had, I was trying to go crazy learning to make graphics for them, and I'm like, oh, I'm going to try to impress them with my passion for making graphics and making these. Trent's gonna laugh, all these way over animated and way zesty graphics, but how that story from when I was sophomore year of college relates to this event is what they told me is that, and I remembered this when it was in Casey, Kentucky, which is about 20 minutes southwest of Mayfield, is that Ryan had stopped me one day and said, no, it's not about the graphics. At the end of the day, it's about what you say. You could have the best graphic, the most flashy animations, the brightest colors, because I go so hog wild with surface maps, and and that came up in my head. At the end of the day, it's not about what you're showing, it's about what you say, and that rang true on all fronts between the Weather Service and our end that night. But that, as somebody who's younger in this industry, and this was my first high end event, that was something I was fortunate to have been taught at a young age. Was that it's not as much about clicking through a bunch of graphics. All you need is the radar and just to say the right things, and that hit home.
Well, and it's kind of the classic too. It's not what you say, it's how you say it. It is what you say, but it is how you. One of all the feedback that we got from that event, so many people told us we could see it on your face and we could hear it in your voice that this was different. And that wasn't an intentional thing. It was just a product of covering an event of this magnitude that, we knew what was going on. And, I mentioned earlier, when you've got an event like this, sometimes you kind of run out of ways to describe it other than just to be real with people. And so, whenever I said this was a once in a generation tornado, I mean, that was taken, directly from the James Spann severe weather coverage playbook. 'Cause I remember watching, April 27th, 2011 coverage, and, similar verbiage being used in that, outbreak in Alabama. And I knew that this was, like Christine mentioned earlier, you take one look at this on radar and this is it. This is the one. And so, I told people this is a once in a generation. This is the storm we're going to be talking about for years around here. And, hopefully that, the messaging that we delivered that night, we're confident that, drove people to take action, which is, the result that we were hoping for.
I think Trent, something to include real quick. Sorry, Bill, is Haley had.
Yes.
We're very big advocates of streaming, and that night, especially being so rural of an area that we are, a lot of people. I mean, heck, there's people who don't even have high-speed internet, and you'd be amazed how many people have Starlink in West Kentucky for their internet, and they get the TV through that. But we had so many people on Facebook stream, and our weekend meteorologist at the time, Kaylee Bowers, was sitting there. Every single person's comments, almost everyone was either getting addressed or spoken. She was going in there one by one, because a lot of people had lost their satellite, even that, because there was so much hail north of that between here and Mayfield that, a lot of people on satellite out in the county lost totally their us over the air, and they were getting it solely through their phone. And she going in there, replying directly to people for all 4 of those hours, I feel like that was a huge part too.
Yeah.
Well, there's been a tremendous amount of discussion on the YouTube chat side about admiration for everyone involved in this night, but you got a lot of fans over there, Noah and Trent. Those guys are really giving you some love over there, and we understand why. Christine, you were started to mention something, and it's really important. When I talked about the weather radio going out, there was something else at play there that was very important.
And yes, and we always talk about, and I know Trent and Noah talk about this when they go out and do talks and say, you can't rely on one way to receive your warnings. And we always tell people, have more than one way, and so I think one of the best technological advances that we've had recently is the use of WEA, which is the wireless emergency alert. So if people weren't able to watch on television and, get a play-by-play from the local news channels, at the very least, hopefully, if they had the WEA set up on their phones, they were able to at least have that alert them, and that would alert them to go turn on their TV. Even people who may have been sleeping or working or wherever they were, thank God for the WEA, because, again, all tornado warnings will go out with the wireless emergency alert. And I think, it's my thought. I don't have any proof of it, but I really feel like that played a big role because we didn't have the weather radio further east on the track.
Dr. Cloco McLean, you got a response there?
Yeah, I mean, I know our sample size is not, on the order of hundreds or anything, but when my team went out and did interviews across the area from Arkansas all the way up to the Bowling Green area, as things got later, there were a lot of people who were going to bed. And you see this dependence on WEA as a first way to get that warning really shoot up after people were getting into the 11 p.m. and later time frame when things were happening. It was almost jarring to see how common that was. I agree with you wholeheartedly. WEA in this event was extremely critical.
So I wanted to open it up to everybody, just to kind of share. I'd like to go to the stories. When you have an event this large, there are such devastating stories about the fatalities and the impacts there, but then there's also amazing stories of survival too. And I wanted to just open it up to everybody to talk about, Trent, you had talked about some of the notes that you had gotten into the station, maybe sharing some of those. And then for Dan and Christine to talk about anything from the surveys that they went on of talking to folks. I would just love to hear some of the stories from the people that you talked to. So we can start with Trent.
Okay. So there's a couple that jump out to me. It took me a week to get down to Mayfield to look at the damage. The day or two after, I was just physically, emotionally exhausted, and then had a full work week. That Friday morning, almost the week after, I went to Mayfield. I went back to the school where I had the school visit, and checked on the folks there. There were a couple of the students that were in that class that lost their home. So some folks had given me a donation to deliver. I did that. Saw the room where I did the school visit and the talk filled with supplies. So one part of the story for me was just the response from the community was incredible. And it was such a blessing to see so many folks coming together, loving on each other and taking care of each other. After I left school, I went up to the court square, which is where kind of a makeshift memorial was set up. There was a fence row in front of the courthouse, and there were pictures of all 24 people from Graves County that passed away in the storm. I just kind of stood out there by myself and reflected for a little while. And while I was standing out there, kind of having a little, personal moment, a car pulls up and a lady got out and she says, "Are you Trent?" I said, "Yes, ma'am." And she just starts weeping and came up and gave me a hug. And then her husband got out of the car and came up and did the same. And so the three of us on a 45-degree cold, rainy day are just standing out there crying and hugging each other. They said that they lived in a mobile home on the east side of Mayfield, and they heard us when the storm was still about 45 minutes away from Mayfield, telling people, if you live in a mobile home, you can't stay there tonight. You have to get out. We told people, no, you got to leave. You know, it's 45 minutes away. You've got time. Get in your car, drive to the other side of the county, go north, you know, go south, stay with a relative. They did that. They said they typically don't really pay that close attention to the weather. And they saw us that night and they said they could just tell that it was different, that we were serious. And so they left. And they came back around 1 o'clock in the morning, about 3 hours after the tornado, and they couldn't find their mobile home. It was gone. And so they said, if we hadn't heard your warning and if we hadn't taken it seriously, we wouldn't be here. And so we just kind of stood out there and had a moment together. What about you?
I'll punt on this one.
No.
I'll take your story.
There was, we had 2 or 3 stories like that of folks that we really pushed the mobile home issue that night and told people, you know, we wanted to be cognizant of the idea that, you know, we don't want to be sending people out on the road away from this when the storm's 15 minutes away. But we had enough confidence of how strong this was going to be that we could tell people, you know, I felt okay saying, hey, there's 45 minutes until it gets to Mayfield or Benton. 45 minutes, you can drive 10 miles to the north and be okay. Do that now. So we had multiple people that lived in mobile homes that told us they heard that and they responded and ultimately we're okay. So that was a big one for us that night.
Thank you, guys. Dan, how about you? Because your area was several, and especially for Bowling Green. So what were some of the things that happened in that area, that maybe some stories you heard or different things that had the biggest impact for you?
Yeah, that was a tough one. And Kim alluded to this earlier. The storms that went through Bowling Green and a lot of the South Central Kentucky counties, unfortunately, occurred right in the middle of the night. It was like midnight or a little after, depending on where you were in the path. And so for a lot of those folks, they told us, you know, their cell phones woke them up. There were some that said they got phone calls from family members. Others said, based on what they were hearing from TV people and other sources, they just slept in their basement that night. They didn't even take a chance with sleeping in their normal room because they said, you know, these weather people are talking about this being a big event. This is pretty serious. You know, maybe we should actually sleep in the basements or already, you know, be downstairs ahead of this thing. And because of that, they survived. There were some homes that were completely taken out. And the people that did that survived those particular events. So there were a lot of good survival stories that we heard. A lot of people telling us they got our warnings. And so that was just really encouraging to see. And, you know, some folks, they lost everything. And this is 2 weeks before Christmas. And, you know, it's just heartbreaking to see families with kids being displaced. But a lot of the people we talked to were really positive, had really good attitudes. They were thankful that they had their lives. They were thankful that they got the warnings. And it was heartbreaking, but it was also encouraging at the same time. You felt a lot of different emotions just talking to the people that survived these events. So it was tough, but it was good too at the same time. You know, going into these surveys and even after the surveys, I didn't sleep well. You know, just seeing the damage was really tough. It was going through a war zone. And I know a lot of other people that I worked with in the office also just had trouble sleeping at night, just from the stories they heard or from the damage that they saw. So it took a toll on the office, and it was really tough.
You said the same thing, Trent. You were not okay when this was over. And how did you deal with that? And then what happened in your office, Dan and Christine and Paducah, in terms of help for the teams there. But Trent, what did you do?
Yeah, I mean, it shook all of us. You know, we were pretty devastated by the whole thing, and even even now, it's still kind of tough to talk about. I had a talk today, this afternoon at the Mayfield Rotary, and I kind of choked up a little bit. It was hard to get through it at times, just kind of reliving all that in your mind. You know, you want to speak on that, for your part?
If I could do anything again, Bill, I would not go there the day after, because
Really?
I would.
I was the same way after April 27th. I went to Pleasant Grove the day after, knowing I regretted it, even though I learned a lot and I met a lot of wonderful people. And I really got in my car that day, and I never wanted to see or hear about a tornado ever again. So I know how you felt.
Fun and games ended when I'll save the long story because it doesn't need to be didn't go over. But this is the end of the afternoon, and they cleared out Mayfield. They sent all the media, because this was before all the national media had flocked to Mayfield Saturday, and we had a live shot at 6 p.m., which the sunset was around 6, and I will never forget the silence in black, like darker than black, of the whole, because outside of Mayfield in Graves County, there's nothing. And seeing animals flat like a pancake on the sides of the street walking through, and smoke coming from buildings, and just hearing people cry, in the middle of the sounds in the sights. Like it's just, I'm sure if I close my eyes, I can hear it now. Walking at 3 in the afternoon through the streets of Mayfield, the crying, the glass, and the amount of people with broken feet, or cut up feet. I still can't believe, that's one thing, at least somebody new to this, man, to hammer home to people, put shoes on and get them out with your helmet out of the garage before the event. God forbid this happens again.
Yeah. It was a traumatic event. And I think, I don't know, just kind of coming off, it's been a hard 2 or 3 years for everybody, with everything, just you're coming out of a pandemic, just a lot of emotions. And it was just really tough. I had some personal things going on at the time too. No need to get into that, but it was just there was a lot going on for a lot of people all at the same time, and then this happens 2 weeks before Christmas, and man, it was just heavy. It was really heavy, and I think this is not my first rodeo in covering an impactful severe weather event, but this one was just on such a whole other level. It was just hard to get over for a few days. Just really, the next morning, I texted my news director and I said, that was the worst night of my career. And I couldn't hold it together. I was in tears, and I just told him, I just hope we did enough. And it was a tough couple of days.
There are a lot of people on this side of the Zoom that are in tears too. Trent, we can't, we can imagine what you went through, but it brings it home when we sit here and talk about it. And I'm glad we're bringing that up. No, I'm glad you brought up about the shoes, because that's a really critical component. Dan, you talked about in your office, the Weather Service brought help. Why don't you talk about that? Christine, what did y'all do in your office?
We were just so busy, for the days, the weeks, the months after the event. For me, I had been through Evansville. I've been through a lot of events, but this was different. I was in a different role, different responsibilities, a lot of responsibilities. And so for us, it was just, getting through the 15, 16-hour days, the long days. You're out on the field all day long. You're talking to people all day long. Then you're getting back to the office, recapping, regrouping, figuring out what you're going to do the next day. So it was just, I felt like a robot for a while. I was just numb because you just day after day after day after day, you are just working. And I don't think you had time to process what you had been seeing day after day after day after day. You didn't have time to process anything. And so it wasn't until later that you just, slowly coming to grips with what had just happened. And long story short, I think everybody in our office dealt with it a little bit differently, depending on who you were and what your job was and how you were involved or not involved or whatever. And we had professional help come in. Valerie Gardner came in. She's one of the, I don't know what her exact title, I apologize, but she had come in and spent some time with us. And that really helped heal us as an office, just being able to talk about it and, one-on-one with her as a group. And so, having that professional help come in is crucial, I think, for many of us to get through something of this caliber.
Same thing at your office, right, Dan? Someone from the Weather Service came in from a behavioral wellness type approach.
Yeah, so it was Valerie Gardner. She came to the office about a month later. And so she actually stayed for 3 or 4 days in the Louisville area. And people could set up appointments to just come and talk to her about the event and other things. And so there were a lot of people that took advantage of that and just talked to her about some of the things they experienced. And I think that helped them a lot.
And talk about the aftermath, the surveys, a daunting task when it's that many path miles. Talk about the support from other offices and other people and how that helped.
Yeah, I mean, it's a lot. And I know Paducah had a lot to cover with the Mayfield track as well. You really can't do it on your own when you're talking dozens and dozens, if not hundreds of miles of total tornado length. For just one office to go out and cover that all is really difficult because we have to not only keep our office staff for forecast and other things that are going on, but we got to have people going out and doing the surveys, people handling media requests, and all sorts of other things that go on after a big event like this. And so we thankfully had help from Nashville, the WFO down there, and then Jackson also helped with our surveys. And the Jackson WCM, Jane Marie Wicks, she actually came out to the Louisville area, brought one of the vehicles from their office and spent several days with us doing surveys with us. And so we were able to maximize the time that we were out on the ground and covering surveys. And, it took, I want to say, close to 10 days at least before we were finally beginning to wrap things up. But we were sending people out every day. My boss, John Gordon, he was down in Bowling Green for almost a week, just surveying that damage. And I just remember him telling me he would try to go out on a survey and then he'd get pulled aside for some sort of briefing, or maybe the governor wanted to talk about something. And so he'd have to go to a press conference. And so, he tried to complete surveys and get work done, but it was just, it's the constant other things that come up. And so it was hard to cover a lot of ground sometimes in those situations, but having help from other offices really made a big difference.
Hey, Christine, talk about the pressure of wanting to know exactly what the rating was so fast on the Mayfield tornado because there was so much national attention on it.
There was, Bill, there was tremendous pressure. And, I remember with Saturday, we went out and we didn't even know the extent of the damage. We didn't know it was continuous. At that point, that morning, we knew Mayfield was hit bad and we knew Dawson Springs was hit. It wasn't until Pat Spoden and I went up in the helicopter that morning and we realized that this was continuous from at least the Kentucky-Tennessee border through the end of our CWA. And that's when it hit us, when we knew that we had more than we can handle. And like Dan, we had other teams come in from Springfield, from the Lincoln office in Central Illinois. We had the quick response team, which is a team that goes out and helps us with higher end assessments. And it was just, I don't think people really understand when you're standing in one particular location in the middle of the track and all you see is damage. It is a mile wide and 128 square miles in just our CWA. There is no way, even with 3 teams going out, that you're going to hit every road, every house. And that was a thing that, we ran into was people like, well, I had a foundation wipe clean. You got to come take a look at my house. Okay. And trying to manage that. And, then I had, not only am I out every day for at least a week and a half, I'm worried about my staff because they're getting inundated with phone calls from national media, from, the nasty comments on social media that people were lambasting us about why is it taking so long? Why is it not an EF5? Trying to counsel them and getting help from our headquarters. What are we supposed to say here? What are our protocols here? And just dealing with that. And even on Sunday, I remember doing a national press conference, and I remember, one of the media, it might even been the Weather Channel. They're like, what are we rating it? I'm like, it's Sunday. I've been out for literally a day and a half. We haven't seen everything yet. We're trying to go to the hardest hit areas, but there's so many areas that are hard hit here. It's nearly impossible. So that was a struggle. And then you had correspondence from the White House contacting us through our public affairs officials, and they're wanting the rating. And so again, plus, like Dan mentioned, we have so many other factors that nobody even realizes. Phone calls. I want to do an interview today at 5. 60 Minutes was here. We had to take them out for a day. They had to film at the office. There was so much going on. I mean, we could spend 2 hours just talking about the aftermath, and people don't realize all the stuff that goes on behind the scenes of what we're responsible for. Again, that rating is obviously the utmost importance, and trying to get the science and right and all that. But yeah, it was a struggle for sure. So we made it through. And, before I if I run out of time, I want to make sure that it is known that if it weren't for Pat Spoden, who I know you know very well, and my boss, Steve Eddy, those two guys were my rock. I would never have been able to get through the weeks and the months, after this tornado. Those guys never left my side. And, it's a great tribute to them to be able to share the story and to be able to now have the knowledge to be able to help others, because you've been through it all. And as somebody said, you've got this, there's not much you can't handle. But again, I think it's a tribute to, taking care of one another, and not only management staff here alongside me, but my staff. The staff is unbelievable. So kudos to them for helping us make it through this.
And Dan, we're just talking in the chat about why in the world is that number so important? People take it as a badge of honor, I guess, that they got hit by an EF5, and then you've got all the armchair quarterbacks that are out there. But your office, obviously, kudos to Christine's boss. Your boss is one of our favorite people, John Gordon. Your teams took around an engineer and some students from WKU with you, and you found really shoddy construction that made, in a lot of cases, what looked like EF5 damage on the surface, very evident that it wasn't. That seems pretty brilliant that you took around that engineering team with you on some of those surveys.
Yeah. So I wasn't there on those particular surveys, but John did utilize an engineer for those. And I think that helped him a lot with some of the homes he had some questions about. Because, obviously as meteorologists, we're not going to know everything there is to know about how structurally sound a foundation should be, what exactly needs to be in place for everything. So having an engineer, someone who's an expert in that field, I think can really help with the damage rating side of things. And we got a lot of flack on social media for some of that, because we'd post pictures of the damage and put a rating next to it. And people would be like, what are you talking about? That's an EF5. You guys are crazy. What are you doing? And so there was a
that
lot
row of trees behind the house right there that's still
standing. Right. It's like they didn't take into consideration everything around or the structural quality of the construction. But they see a home leveled, and automatically in their eyes that's EF5. So having that engineer there helped us a lot for those surveys, because we could back up a lot of what we were saying with some sound, science and engineering insight.
That just seems so brilliant. Trent, no, I know y'all trying to get your special done. It's been amazing that you give us all this time. we promise we'll hurry through these last few questions because I know most of the panelists want to ask one. Rick Smith, did you have anything you wanted to ask? But Rick, you're muted still. We got it in. There's our pandemic response.
Yeah, you would think by now. Trenton, Noah, just real quick. I know the Weather Service, what happened after the fact as far as some mental health support and things like that. Did your station provide you guys with anything? Do you have anything like that? A service as available, employee assistance program or anything like that? I don't want to get into your personal business here, but just curious what the support was there at the station.
I believe that our company does have a mental health. There's a service you can call into. I don't know anything about it. We weren't directly provided any of those services. I think we kind of coped all together. Honestly, the three of us spent a pretty good amount of time together in the days after that. Just kind of, some days just hanging out, talking about it. We spent some time just out, grabbing a bite to eat, doing something fun just to try to get our minds off of it. But as far as any, organized professional help, that wasn't really part of the equation for us.
James Adelot, anything you want to ask any of our panel tonight?
Yeah, I'm still kind of seeing some commonalities in here, and from messaging about boots and shoes being critical. We've got a lot of TV meteorologists that watch WeatherBrains, and I think this is an important lesson for everybody, whether or not we do tornadoes a lot or occasionally, is that boots, shoes, and helmets need to be part of the messaging. I think social networking needs to be part of the messaging, and by that I mean encourage people to call their friends and family that are in the path of the storm, because study after study shows that really matters. And I think the other thing that you all did you may not be aware of that's really important is that you were in front of the chroma key wall, and it makes a huge difference when people can connect with your eyes and your face and your expressions and your mannerisms, that unspoken urgency that you were able to convey that night. And I think if there's any encouragement I can give to TV Mets that are watching this, it's get in front of the key wall, make that connection.
Troy, I know you got to get out of here pretty early, and I think we've covered a lot of ground. Did you have anything else you needed to say?
Just, I want to thank Noah and Trent and of course, Christine, Dan, everyone for talking to us tonight, because I know this is not easy, and just appreciate you being with us tonight.
Absolutely. Dr. Neil Jacobs, anything we left unsaid, anything about the models that we need to point out?
No, no more questions. I just, like Troy, wanted to thank y'all for doing such an amazing job. I know, with everything that could possibly go wrong that went wrong, the number of lives that you saved is really impressive. So thanks.
Absolutely. Amen to that. Dr. Kim Clocko-McClain, anything you want to add?
Just really quick, and I know that you could probably say a lot to this, but if you even just have some quick thoughts, something we sort of blew past that is nonetheless remarkable about this was the job you guys did as forecasters days before this ever happened and before all the stuff started to go wrong, that there was a lot of uncertainty to this forecast. There were reasons SPC wasn't drawing an area until, maybe the day 3 outlook. And you all talked about how you were starting to message about the threat early in the week, and putting yourself back in the shoes before you knew what this event was going to be. The weight of uncertainty that was on your shoulders, but it sounds like you were sort of seeing this potential high-end event and you wanted to say something about it. I'm just hoping to get a little bit of insight from all of you. Why, what made this stand out to you, to blow past that sort of uncertainty and yet try to emphasize the potential of this event? Because that's pretty remarkable that you did that early. When we did our public site interviews, at least in the English speaking populations. Next week, we're going to talk about Spanish speaking and immigrant populations. It's a little different, but at least in the English speaking populations, we didn't encounter anyone who wasn't aware the day before that it could be a bad day. That's remarkable for this area and for December. So I just love to hear from all of you a little bit about why.
Trent, you want to start?
Yeah, sure. So, you know, it was one of those things. It was when Noah and I both do this in our forecasting. When we're on air, we try to do the best we can to convey every part of the forecast to our viewers, and that includes the uncertainty. I think maybe there's some old school, schools of thought that, you do your forecast and you tell people what's going to happen. And you don't, I think even I've had a consultant in the past say, well, you don't want to tell people that you're uncertain about this because you're the authority, you're the weather authority. You don't want to say I'm uncertain because that makes you sound like you're not the authority. But, again, we shoot straight with people. And so, you'd be surprised too, the amount of weather knowledge that our viewers do have. And so whenever we go and tell people on air, hey, here's the thing, we're seeing, severe weather parameters that we haven't seen in years, but there's one or two ingredients that we're not sure if they're going to come together or if there's going to be limiting factors. We just lay it all out there on the line for people so that they know if this doesn't pan out, well, I guess that cap, it did hold after all. But, in the days, 2-3 days ahead of time, we're seeing, SIG tours in our area that are 6, 7, 8, 9, which is just ridiculous for any time of year. But for Western Kentucky in December, we knew we didn't have a choice. We had to tell people how bad it could be if everything came together.
Anything you want to add to that, Christine or Dan or Noah? I didn't want to cut you off there because I know you're, you may have your own opinion of that, but what did you want to say about that, Christine? Anything?
Sure. Like I said, I think I looked back on all of our area forecast discussions, and I think as early as Saturday, the Saturday before, our forecasters were talking about a significant system. And like any meteorologist knows, usually the higher end events, the signal is going to be stronger early on, and you're going to see the signal being stronger. And so I think our office's approach has always been take it slow and, ramp up from there. We're never one to say, oh my gosh, 7 days out, we're going to be, throwing all these maps and stuff at people. We're more like, yep, and we're watching it. You should be watching it too. And we ramped up slowly. And I remember distinctly, I think it was the day before I had got back from Henderson from that Facebook Live event we were doing. I remember distinctly asking the evening shift forecaster, I said, how's it look for tomorrow? And again, this was a guy that's been here longer than I have. And he's like, it's not looking good, Christine. And that's something I heard. And even when I called them on Friday, I called the office numerous times on Friday during the event. And I kept asking them, and, even again, talking with veteran forecasters, seeing everything. And they're like, this is not good, Christine. This is not good. We don't know exactly how it's going to unfold. Even that day, I think there was some alluding, people talked about, we didn't know exactly how it was going to unfold because there was convection beforehand. We weren't sure if that was going to wipe out things for later. And there was still a lot of uncertainty the day of how things were actually convectively going to work out. But we knew that the ingredients were all together. And I think, that's something that we kept messaging throughout that week.
Dan, anything you want to add to that?
Yeah, so actually prior to that event, I think it was either a Sunday night or a Monday night, we actually had a weak tornado. It was in a really tough environment. But that event, I think, kind of raised our awareness for really looking at the environment and setups, because going in then into the Friday night, December 10th, 11th event, we were already, kind of already in a severe weather mindset. We already had a tornado earlier in the week. And some of the tools that we had, I don't have a lot of time to get into them, but basically they look at climatology and how forecast parameters compare to climatology for that time of year. And the CAPE and shear parameters in some of those tools were just super high. And so that kind of alerted us, okay, this could be a potentially significant event. And at least in this part of the country, we often have very strong shear with any systems that push through, but we're just always lacking the instability. And thankfully, it's a good thing. Otherwise, we'd have a lot more tornado outbreaks. But there were some signs with this event that we would have ample instability to kind of fuel those storms. And so that kind of kept us on alert.
Well, let me just say,
James, one thing I want to say real quick. But that Friday morning, our general manager in Murray, Kentucky, he's a big Trent and Noah fan, and he said to me, I called and to talk to him about this, and he said, "Is it as bad as they're saying it's going to be?" And I said, "Rich, it's going to be worse," because I'd looked at those STPs that morning, and they were all double digits. And I bet, Noah, you probably were noticing that same thing. Anything you want to add to that, Noah, before we toss it to James?
Real short, I guess I'll just say this. I wanted to mention that we did a lot of leveraging with Facebook Lives every day that week. And sometimes maybe even not just for this high of events, maybe sometimes I get into too much of the weeds, but joking aside, I feel like the having people know that regardless of the event, it doesn't have to be a high-end event, that we're going to be there for, even if it's a marginal risk, he's going to do a live in the morning and I'm going to do one in the evening, and I'm going to take as much time as needed to go through the scenarios and telling people what we know and focusing less on what we don't. And if all we know is that we don't know, then saying that. And I felt like
I was going to say just, and again, I've not said a lot tonight. I like to listen. I'm a bag of hot air. And I have been very guilty over the years of talking too much and not listening enough. And I have learned a lot tonight. I think that's the one thing that I've learned in my old age. And I'm an old weather warrior here. But there's so much we don't know, and there's so much to learn. And but by listening to the four of you, it's been a really good learning experience for me and for our listeners. But I want to thank Noah, Trent, Christine, and Dan, all of you for your work. Again, watching from a distance, it was just remarkable. And I know the hell you went through. Not many people on the planet do, but I do. And so thanks to all of you for your work. But we're really running long here. And again, we need to cram in picks of the week. And what we're going to do here is do picks of the week. And we're going to do it really quickly in shotgun format. And again, I'm not going to make Noah, Trent, Christine, and Dan do a pick of the week here. And then we're going to go quickly to Tony Rice. And we're going to wrap the show up with Jen's special audio. And I want everybody to just kind of sit back, and I want you to listen to her piece because it's really important. It's what this is all about, and this is why we do what we do. But before we get into that very quickly, let's do picks of the week really quickly. My pick, it is an interview that Bob Ryan did with some older meteorologists. I was one of them, but he's got a bunch of legends on here, and I'm not one of them. But anyway, it's about gaining trust as a broadcast meteorologist. How do you do that in this era? And I really enjoyed being a part of that and watching what Bob did. So Bob's one of my, longtime mentors. So that'll be my pick of the week. So let's just kind of go shotgun here. And again, the notes will be up on weatherbrains.com. Rick Smith, what you got? Go.
My pick of the week is new guidance from the Warning Decision Training Division on tornado warnings. A lot of people don't realize, but all the training that the Weather Service meteorologists have to take to know how to issue a tornado warning, most of that training is available online. So my pick of the week is a link to that training. You can see the module, and you can also see a 3-page handout that gives some very specific guidance that we use for deciding when to issue a tornado emergency, for example.
And that is outstanding. That is really gold stuff. And I think James A. had to leave. James A., you probably had to go do the news. And I do believe that he is gone. He's on Fox 23, Severe Weather Center Action News, live, local, late-breaking weather authority. But again, we're going to put his pick up on weatherbrains.com. Troy Kimmel, what you got for us? Go.
I don't think the foghorn's appropriate tonight, but I'm going to skip by. I'm going to pass on, James.
Okay, I understand. All right, Kim, what you got? Go.
James A. wanted someone to steal his pick. So I'll at least preview what he was going to cover, that today is the anniversary of the Tulsa tornado of 1975, which appears to have been a really significant event in his life. So he's going to have some resources he shares about that.
Good deal. Neil, what you got for us?
My pick of the week is a website called turbly.com. It is, if you want to scare yourself before you get on your flight, you can enter your flight information. I'll give you a turbulence forecast. If you want to convince yourself you'll be safe, you can scroll down and see how much stress an airplane wing can actually handle. It's orders of magnitude more than you'll ever experience.
Yeah, I've never seen that site. That's absolutely fascinating. All right, Jen, what you got? Go.
Mine is the Live Storms Media drone footage of Mayfield at first light to December 11th, 2021.
And Bill Murray, what you got?
Yeah, I'll take the foghorn, James. If you got it handy.
We'll not blow. This is not appropriate this week. We'll toot the foghorn next week.
But Kim alluded to our next week's guest. We're going to talk to Joseph Trujillo and some of his amazing work in regards to folks that are English as a second language in this matter that we're talking about tonight. So I'm really looking forward to that show.
Awesome. So what we're going to do here is go to Tony Rice and his report. And then we're going to close the show with what Jen has to say this week in tornado history. And again, I just want everybody, and listen, I know we're busy and we've got things going on here, but just take a minute and listen to Jen as we close the show with her audio tonight. And again, what she is going to do, it's a reminder for all of us as to why we're here and we do what we do. So thanks to all for listening. And again, don't go away yet, but let's go to Tony Rice and then we'll hear from Jen right after that.
Looking beyond the atmosphere, here's Tony Rice with your astronomy outlook.
On Wednesday, December 7th, the moon will pass in front of Mars, creating a lunar occultation visible from much of the continental US and all of Canada. Occultations actually happen a lot. This is because the moon's orbit, while tilted about 5 degrees to that of Earth's, it's still in a pretty similar orbit to the rest of the planets, so it passes in front of them quite a bit. This is the third time this year for Mars alone to hide behind the moon. But occultations are very much like solar eclipses in that they're only viewable if you're standing on the right place on Earth. So this is kind of rare, especially when you consider about 3/4 of the planet is covered by water, and the sun's got to be sufficiently below the horizon for it even to be visible. There was a lunar occultation of Mars back on the 21st of July, but it was only visible in eastern portions of Russia, and that was up around the Arctic Circle. June 22nd was visible in the South Pacific, but that's in an area so far from land, it's where we aim deorbiting spacecraft. So Wednesday night, everyone northwest of a line extending from about San Antonio, Texas, up to the southern tip of Maine will see Mars disappear behind the moon and reappear between 30 and 60 minutes later, depending on where you are. For example, in Seattle, the show starts at 6:52 p.m. Pacific, and the red planet will reemerge almost exactly an hour later. Down in Los Angeles, it starts at 6:30 Pacific, and Mars will reemerge again about an hour later. Over in Pittsburgh, Mars disappears about 10:35 p.m. Eastern and reappears after just about 30 minutes. For where to look from your location, check out the International Occultation Timing Association's website at lunar-occultations.com. And occultations is spelled OCCULTATIONS. Click on the December 8th event for a huge table of cities. Even if you're in one of those cities that won't see the complete occultation, it's still worth taking a look at the full moon and Mars on Wednesday night. They'll be separated by less than a degree. It's your astronomy outlook. Follow me at RTP Hokie for more spacey stuff like this.
Calling all weather enthusiasts, join the AMS Weather Band and become part of the American Meteorological Society, whose members have been at the forefront of weather, water, and climate research for over 100 years. You'll get to go behind the scenes with the 10,000 plus scientists, broadcasters, educators, and researchers of the AMS. The AMS Weather Band brings together weather professionals and weather enthusiasts. Band members can grow their knowledge and appreciation of weather and climate by participating in virtual events, online discussions, Q&As, AMAs, webinars, photo contests, and more. AMS Weather Band gives you the opportunity to interact directly with those in the scientific community. Learn more and join the band today at amsweatherband.org. This week in tornado history, December 10th to the 11th, 2021. Last year, many of us watched as storms tore apart lives and communities across Arkansas, Missouri, Tennessee, Illinois, and Kentucky. After events of this magnitude, images depicting seas of wreckage where homes and businesses once stood can blind us to the true nature of the loss at hand. Ranging from 6 days to 98 years of age, these irreplaceable individuals were cherished as friends or family by thousands. These are the names of the 92 people whose lives were taken that night by tornadoes. Golden West Hembry, 94. June Pennington, 52. Aniston Rackley, age 9. George Martin, age 60. Mark Travis, 28. Grayson Gunn, 12. Steve Gunn, 50. Jamie Hall, 47. Danny Inman Sr., 72. Ollie Borgman, 84. Clayton Cope, 29. Kevin Dickey, 62. Etheria Hebb, 34. Austin McEwen, 26. DeAndre Sean Morrow, 28. Larry Verdon, 46. Wade Martin Lill, 57. 4 members of the Gingrich family. Jacob, age 31, Emma, 31, Marilyn, 7, and Daniel, age 4. Kathy Green, 77. Jamie Wagner, 66. Pam Gilbert, age 60. Derek Gilbert, 44. Robert Baldry, 87. Jessica Cook, 33, and her newborn baby, Anna Joy Cook, died at 6 days old. Bobby Spradling, 50. Devin Burton, 21. Jeff Creason, 57. Robert Daniel, age 47. Elijah Lewis, 35. Yvonne Ramirez Lopez, 51. Jill Monroe, 52. Kayla Smith, age 30. Joe Marshall Ward, 36. Janine Williams, 50. Ollie Reeves, age 80. Rosa June Sanders, 60. Jaleel Dunbar, age 3. Neela Mae Gaither, 78. Judith Davis, 83. Evelyn Rattay, 98. Larry Burden, 73. Millie Lipford, 72. Richard Lipford, 69. Richard Carlisle II, 67. John Hale, 54. Volley Calvin Kelly, 84. Sonia K. McChesney, 77. Carolyn Sigler, 78. Claude Mitchell, 67. Carol Grisham, 80. Marcia Hall, 71. Jeff Eckert, 70. Jennifer Eckert, 69. Jenny Bruce, 65. Ernie Aiken, 86. Carl Hogan, 60. Baby Oakland Coon, 2 months old. Mary Alice Adams, 74. Martin Acree, 34. Billy Miller, 73. Judith Miller, 72. Matthew Ferguson, 50. Chase Oglesby, 5 months old. Kentucky District Judge Brian Crick, 43. Rita Gish, 74. John Hardin, 36. Cheryl Snodgrass, 52. Diane Varney, 62. Scotty Flenner, 34. Megan Flenner, 32. Corey Scott, 27. 5 members of the Beshich family: Elisa, 25, Elma, 10 months, Elma, 5, Samantha, 5 months, Selmir, 6. 7 members of the Brown family: Nariah, 16, Nolan, age 10, Niles, 4, Nisa, 13, Rachel, 36, Stephen, 35, Victoria Smith, 64, Say Meh, 38, May White, 77, Terry Jane, 67, Robert Williams Jr., 65, Teresa Duncan, 42.